Hey, also, it's been a while since I've done another vlog, so I thought I would put one out there. There's been some stuff coming up on Stay Bladed Costa Rica that at least gives me things to think about and talk about. I mean, I feel like most everything I've said and done before, either in written form or in DVD form or on previous blogs. But nonetheless, I'm going to try to put this out there just to keep putting the message out, you know, that eventually people will hear. So basically, PSP is set up with, you know, there are several things that we keep in mind as a system. I'm only going to talk about one of those things today, but one of those things is sort of the I'm kind of at a loss for words, but basically the hierarchy of events in fighting. So I'm going to basically list them here, and then we'll talk about them some to make sure I don't miss any. I made the little cheat sheet. But basically the hierarchy is from worst case scenario is you're going to get hit. You're going to get hit hard, and you're going to get hit often. And then the next case is blocking or parrying or stop hits, which could be, you know, stop kicks, or it could just be literally interrupting their flow. And then the next level for me is evasion. And so evasion doesn't mean anything other than you saw it soon enough to get out of the way. Blocking is sort of the tween, right? So you either get hit, or you block, or you get out of the way. The next level to that is counter striking, right? We call them entries in Pencak Silat Pertempuran. We use those as a point of advantage, basically. So, you know, when a person sticks their arm out to strike you, they have open areas, and since they have open areas, we try to exploit those. And so we want to work consistently at learning to evade and counter. So for us, those are called entries. And then the next step, or the next possible solution, is to be preemptive. Preemption, there are several forms, right? So there's preemption that preempts their attack. So basically you attack before they attack. You could relocate yourself so that they are unable to successfully attack. There's preemption in the sense that you are able to maybe talk to them and de-escalate. So there's lots of forms for some of these. They're not just one thing. Having some clue of what an imminent attack looks like is paramount in all of this, right? If not, see number one, and number one is get hit. So, you know, it's all variations of timing. That's a thing that I think eludes people. You know, and they understand it conceptually when you tell them, but they haven't literally thought about it, and they haven't formulated a process for working through it. So it's really all about timing. Getting hit is one thing. Blocking is when you see it just enough to put something up to disrupt the strike, right? And or kick or whatever, push, doesn't matter. And then the next one is evading, right? Evading can include parrying, but it doesn't necessarily need to. That's usually more where your timing is just slightly off, you're a little bit behind, and you parry and you evade, right? Strict evasion, you're slightly ahead of timing, and you still may have been caught off guard. So the next level is counterattacking, right? So you evade and you immediately counterattack. That is kind of the bread and butter of what I teach. But that's not it. I mean, to me, like one of the biggest failings of martial arts is so much time is spent on the block and the defensive measure, and not enough time is spent on the counter measure. And even when there's countermeasures developed, they are, in most cases, the timing ratio is incorrect. So for example, you strike me or strike at me and I block you. That's fantastic, right? I didn't get hit. In most martial arts, I then start my offensive movement, and that's fantastic, except it's not going to happen. I mean, really, it's not going to happen. So unless you've done something with your block that is completely disruptive, parry that's completely disruptive to their follow-up attack, because they most likely have one, then you cannot assume that you will have the time or the option of counter-attacking. So the only way a counterattack takes place is if you do it simultaneously with their attack, or nearly with their attack. It doesn't have to be exactly 1-to-1, but it needs to be as near to a 1-to-1 ratio as possible. And what do I mean by a 1-to-1 ratio? I mean, they strike you, and by the time their hand gets back to the starting point, so they're striking you with their other hand, you need to be done. You cannot be pretending or thinking or blocking or moving into position, because frankly at that point it's too late. Their second attack is coming. And what I have been amazed about in the martial arts is the fluidity of the mind. People who have no training, people who have tons of training, their mind is sharp and quick, and they will just hit you. So you don't have time, and they will adapt. You know, you can move and relocate, and that's cool, but they will adapt, and they will adapt in, you know, split seconds to hit you. So will it have the most force it could have? Not usually, but it doesn't matter, because once you get hit, you tend to be thrown off as well. Your timing is interrupted, you know, there's a lot of things that come into play there. So sorry about all the moving around there. So I'm really particular about trying to mitigate as much of that as possible. And the way to mitigate it is to enter and learn how to bridge off of their bridge. Eventually, you know, when we get a little further down the road and a person gets confident and they have some skills to defend themselves, we will work also to be offensive. And offensive, you know, becomes strike, you know, often a trap or counter trap, and then counterattacking. So the counterattacking never really goes away. You can call it combination attacking, however you want to get there verbally. Really what happens is I attack, you defend, I counter the defense, and then I re-attack. And it sounds like I'm disengaging, but the way that we do it in PSP is that we are continuously engaging. So there's a lot of forward pressure, there's a lot of offense. Even in our defense, our goal is to try to assume the timing, is to take over the timing of the event and not give you an opportunity to recover. So the way we do that is to exploit your weakness, right? And exploiting weakness, you know, there's a lot of ways to do that. You can feint. You know, maybe you feint a jab and come across with a hook. Maybe you bait. So in Pencak Silat we use sikap pasang, and sikap pasang we use basically our ways to bait and attack. So, you know, I might like leave my head completely open for your attack so that you're able to feel safe enough to do it. and I have to be in a position where I'm safe enough to defend. And baiting is a huge component to Pencak Silat, if it's done well, in my opinion. So, there's lots of different ways this all happens, but at the end of the day, if you're theoretically pursuing a martial art that is complete, and really maybe not even a martial art, but maybe let's say a personal protection system, like at the end of the day, none of my guys should suck at fighting. If they suck at fighting, then I suck as a teacher, because that's not my goal. So my goal is to get people who don't suck at fighting, and then to lead them to martial arts so that they have a bigger, more useful component to living life. So my goal is different, right? I don't introduce you to martial arts, I introduce you to fighting, and then to martial arts. Some introduce you to martial arts and move you to fighting. Some introduce you to martial arts and you stay there. That's cool. That's not my path. My path is to try to introduce you to fighting. So from that, I know that being offensive is ultimately the best product, yields the greatest results, the most consistent thing. And so, I'm sorry, I'm moving this closer because it's really windy out here and I don't know how much mic noise you're getting. But yeah, so I try to work more on the Maslow's hierarchy. I want you to be able to defend yourself first and foremost, and then move to how to make your life better. Most of us are going to live life more than we're going to fight, but at the same time, fighting tends to be the most critical thing. Excuse me. So I want to make sure that we're able to fight and able to do what we need to do first, and then worry about, how do I become a better person and all that jazz, which is a component that I care about. I'm not strictly combative. I do believe in the value of martial arts as a whole for living life, and so I want to have that as well. In the case of fighting, though, I think too many martial arts, and many that I have studied, focus almost exclusively on the block and counter method. And when I say block and counter, I don't mean block and simultaneously counter, very different things. I mean block and then counter, right? Two separate times. And what's essentially wrong with that scenario is that it teaches you some components, but it doesn't teach you the right relationship. Relationship is everything. If I'm parrying or blocking and evading, but I'm not simultaneously hitting you, my second hit is probably most likely not to succeed, or my counter hit is most likely not to succeed. Why is that? Because you're probably also striking me again, because I haven't done anything to deter you. So I have to be able to deter you first, and then I can do whatever. So if I block and I do not follow up, my block needs to be so freaking disruptive that it upsets your whole structure. If it does not, it is not sufficient. Period. Or, for example, I could kick your knee out, right? That is a type of block or stop, right? And if I stop your leg from advancing, even though all I've done is evade, essentially, and counter your movement, that puts me in an advantageous position. For sure, I've disrupted your timing, so your follow-up attack becomes kind of pointless. Not always, but most of the time. And so those are the kinds of things that PSP is resolved to study and to work on. So we do not believe, we literally believe in, hey, do you know how to take a hit? If you don't know how to take a hit, you are not studying correctly. You must learn to take a hit and then recover, and recover into a position of advantage, or at least a known starting point. We call them set points. From those positions, you can do all the normal stuff you do, because you don't want to add chaos to the mix, meaning you don't want to add your own unknowns. Then parrying. Parrying is fine, it's great, it does its work. We do that. We don't typically block unless we treat it as a destruction. Our destructions are meant to be disruptive to the entire being. Those are the same things. You can do those. The next one is to counterattack, or just strictly evade. And evading is good. You can use it as baiting. We use baiting to draw a person in. So if I have somebody who just jabs and doesn't actually commit to an attack, I will back up, give them space and room and let them jab and let them get overcommitted, because they will have to cover distance. Once they cover that distance, I will use that as an opportunity to do the fourth level, which is counter-striking. Counter-striking or entering. And then from counter-striking and entering, we have preemptiveness, right? Which is seeing how a body moves, into position to prepare to strike. Seeing all of the emotional stuff that happens that gets somebody prepared to strike. And then learning how to either move away from it, set up a different angle, potentially de-escalate by verbal skills, de-escalate by reorientation of a relationship, or even to counterattack, or to attack, I should say. To preemptively attack, which doesn't always mean striking, right? You can do this through checking. There are other ways to do this. So that's the way that Pencak Silat Pertempuran works. We have these all within the system, and if you're not doing all of those things, then there's something you're missing in combat. And you may be a good fighter, but you're making up for your system if your system doesn't actually train those. You're doing those things, but your system is not. And just being aware of that is a big thing, and most people are not, so that's why I produced this vlog. Take care, man, be safe, and keep at it, keep training, working hard, and keep asking good questions. Later.